Well, it says it's got the right stuff. It does. Oh, good. Um, been a couple months since I plugged in my microphone. I just unplugged it and put it up on a shelf, and there it was for until I undid that and unput it on the shelf and unplugged it, and then I re-put it on my desk, and there it sat for a couple more days. Been playing around a lot with spare chalk in Blender. I also learned how to pretend to make a PBR texture with some free programs and made a whole bunch of textures for myself. Made this add-on, or like 10 add-ons. So when you have some nodes, let's just say for the sake of things, I'll have these different nodes. It doesn't really matter what's up here exactly, other than I select something. This node is selected, Control Shift Alt K. Just does it named the node based off of what it was hooked up to. So we have this one here. I'll do this one. So it mostly makes sense on end nodes. Like, you don't really actually label everything. I know you might see some very well organized node graphs, but like the inputs and outputs are nice if they're labeled, the sockets, but this just names a node after the socket it's plugged into, so it's kind of only helpful in some cases. Like, for example, if I was just like, oh, I need a little number here to adjust, and I added input, what do we call it here? I haven't used the I used this spare chalk one more, but we'll just say we want input. Oh, it's a value, not a number. So I put the value, and I hook the value up to whatever. Like, maybe that's because really this node tree was really huge, and we were like, man, there's a lot of nodes over there we didn't even want to look at. We just stuck the important stuff right here, and then I can just go. And now I know what I'm clicking on. It's not just value. So I made that. Also, while I was at it, a box so you can just label it. And those two things are for the node editor. Also in the node editor, I made my old material library plugin show up here, and it took a little bit to make it work and show up. But so if I was to say blah blah blah, I like that material, send to library. Now I quit and open up Blender again. Pay close attention there. You didn't see me save the file. I'm just gonna try and load up blah blah blah. It will be way down here. So there we were, right back where we started, but we're in a different blend file. And that's pretty cool. So there's two cool add-ons. Slightly updated. I know there was more. Yeah. What else? the geometry nodes thing's still not doing it for me, so I mostly use Fairchalk, and most days I can't even wrap my brain around it. I mean, even if I can, I can't. It's like, it's not comfortable. It takes a while to get comfortable with something so weird. Uh, we'll do something. Let's do something. Fairchalk. You won't be able to read what's going on unless I make my text bigger, and so I will do that. Interface 1.8. See how big that is. Is that big enough? That's big enough. Well, let's go for a straight up 2. So I will probably just say the names as I do them of the nodes. Sometimes I just say the letters if I trying to learn the hotkeys, but it's so easy from the right click menu. I don't use hotkeys on this Fairchalk stuff. It's weird. Like I do on Cycles, but I don't on Fairchalk. Yeah, so it opens up a lot of fields, and I've explored but not used to their fullest extent. Like some of these, I'm like, wow, I could really use that. And so the one that, like, just to make a little bit of progress for me myself here, I'm gonna try and use the loft. Like that's a tall order here. Like if you're new to Fairchalk, you've got a blue, sorry, purple and 2 blues, and you've got a blue and a green for your inputs. Let's start with a generator off the generator list. So normally we have greens and oranges. This purple and this blue, these are those types of objects that are not your normal thing. A lot of times, like different things will convert, but not so smoothly as in Cycles, where the shader can just be like, oh, that's an integer, just convert it to a float, be done with it. Or they're like, oh, that's a float, just convert it to an integer. It's a little bit more explicit with Fairchalk, but it's also a lot more flexible with what you can do. So steep learning curve. Here we go. I'm gonna start with the orange sockets and how to see stuff that's in them. The verts are the orange things, and so I'm generating some verts. I'm just gonna take this generator and ditch it. We'll start with numbers. We're gonna start with a number, and then a way to see it. So the stethoscope and a number is like that's as simple as you can get here. So you see over here the bracket, it's inside 2 brackets. It's not just the number being displayed right here. It's the whole bracket thing is the data that gets passed around. Sverchuk's data has lists, and different types of data have different shapes of lists, or different yeah, the shape of the list is very important. That's what you kind of manipulate. Sometimes you manipulate the data, sometimes you're just worried about shaping the list. The data stays the same. So a number, if we put a bunch of numbers in at once, we call that a vector. It's the same thing, except, so here's our numbers. They're just, if we're talking about one number at a time, we have a green thing, and when we bunch them up together and we call it a vector, we have 1, 2, 3 for this vector, but we also have, look, we have a color in, it's a yellow. It's got alpha. I mean, it's not like it changes, but so that's a group of four things. What's that other thing that's got four things? When you're dealing with 3D stuff, you deal with quaternions a lot. There's a pink. That's four things that's pink, and this four things is yellow. We have three things that are orange. A one thing that is green. Curves looked like they were that bluish color. Surfaces have that purple. What's a matrix? Matrices are kind of a pretty blue. That's the wrong, I clicked the wrong thing. Matrix in. We have this blue. So, a matrix is like a group of groups. And they can be of different sizes, as you know, as you can see. You're just storing some data all together as a chunk. And at the level of where Fairchalk works, it's the list. This number here, you think of it as it's just a number, but it could also be considered as a list with one thing on it, which happens to be a number. And that list's shape is a different shape than a list with three numbers or two numbers or whatever it is. It's like it doesn't matter what the numbers are, it's just they are numbers. And ultimately at the bottom of every list in Fairchalk you probably have numbers. And so you worried about the length of a list. That's one aspect of its shape. You're worried about sub lists or groupings. Like the bracket, square bracket, square bracket. So this is like it's a list. Reading from left to right, we've got bracket, bracket. So that it's a list. And the first thing on the list is the only thing on the list. And it's a list. And the first thing on the list is a number. And that number is 7.38. And that's all that's the data of this number to Fairchalk. They have a list manipulating levels thing called list levels. So we'll stick this through list. Yeah. Hello. List. See, I've actually, it would be better if I said all this with a Ukrainian accent. But just if you're trying to learn Sverchok and you're having a hard time, just say the word list over and over again. With different words. You can pick any word, make up another word. Like we'll say list levels. And we'll put this in. Number into the data. List levels. Now we need to have that stethoscope. I was control clicking on that to get that. So the stethoscope's like, yeah, here's that list. I haven't done anything yet. So if I flatten a list, one of those levels goes away. I click flatten, and one of the brackets is gone. It's just bracket 738. What happens if I wrap it? We get an extra level. What if I wrap it again and again and again? So it's the levels of wrapping that they don't show. It's not as apparent when it's a list of one thing, but this list levels is probably, you know, like that's your savior when you work yourself into a corner and you're like, it seems like everything's hooked up right, it should work. Maybe list levels is what you need. Maybe levels delete. And I don't know how to work that one as well. But list has del levels is what it's called. So the main thing is I think Fairchild doesn't really want to look like way down levels of lists. The first three are what we mainly deal with on the nodes. And so a node will be expecting things to come in some sort of canonical format. Let me go look at, let's move this stethoscope over to the vectors. Hey, come on. What's her problem? There. So this vector, what does it look like normally? We'll just look it straight up so you don't have to be confused. It's this, just the same. Bracket, bracket, and then a vector is inside parenthesis. And that's pretty important. So a lot of times you will say, like, let's see what this generator does for a line here with a couple verts. Alt drag. So we got the parentheses. The parentheses are now on the outside of a list, with brackets are on the inside, but it's still the same shape. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then there's a bunch of them. So if you just have like 2 of them, you can see it a little better, I guess. Where you will probably find most things is that when you join, you're trying to join, what is the data here? One vertex at a time is these first 3. The next vertex is these 3, and when you make a list for edges or faces, you're referring to the first and the second, and so on. When you join a bunch of vertexes, then you also want to join a bunch of edges. You need to renumber all the edges past the first object that you're joining in. Like if you have 2 objects, the edges, the indexes that they're referring to will change. The ordering of the verts is now, the second group of verts is appended onto the first group of verts, and they got their indices raised up by the number of verts in the first object. So the edges won't be pointing to the correct verts if you don't adjust it. As a mesh join and a list join. So I'm going to go ahead and just like show the mesh join to show, like, don't forget there's also that one. On the modifier change, you have a mesh join, which does a different thing than a list join, but it's like the solution for when you've joined a bunch of things and you're like, now what? I know this isn't going to work because edge indices are keyed to vertex. I mean, edges are literally vertex indices, so if you're changing the vertex indices and you don't change the edge data is stale and points to the wrong verts. How to solve that is the mesh join. How to cause that is the list join. So let's try and get something into the viewport over here. I'm going to delete this cube and then make some stuff. Whoa, it came back. Stay gone. You're still gone? Okay, so deleting, like, say, everything and starting with just a line with just the generator. If it's got an orange and a green or 2 greens, As long as you have an orange and a green, you can just control click it and you'll see something out here. It'll be more apparent if I change my background. So let's do this. Get rid of the light. Camera's cool. Camera's gonna hide I changed my render engine to workbench. I changed to flat lighting and I changed to vertex colors. And then I click this. And then I go to world and I change the viewport color to black. We're not there because we're not in this mode here. That's your Shift Z. So usually I just hit Shift Z. There you go. Alright, so I have a viewer that shows me my sphere chalk viewer over here. That's this guy. And you get that by control clicking. So if I have two line things set up and I control click this guy, see, I'll make this line a very short little tiny line. And then I'm going to go control click this guy. And now we're back. All right, so we can have lots of little nodes just hanging out. They don't have to be hooked up. You can have a lot of node trees and turn them off like this. Just click across. It's off. It's a good idea to like not leave things on if they are really complicated, because when it computes it can take some time. Sometimes you have to click update node tree. Sometimes it seems like clicking, depending on how you work, you might actually get better results by choosing X or Y. I don't know. I'm trying to avoid having to do all that, anything out of the way it's already set up, but this is how it normally is, and there's nothing wrong with turning these off if you have a bunch. Like, here's a different one. And so my other one, this old one I was working on, it didn't have to keep calculating, because it might, you might refer from one to the other, or you might want them all to go. So you just like leave the ones off that you don't want if you want to have. You can have a bunch of node trees in your file and they're not doing anything as long as they're just off. And so let's see, was there anything good going on here? All right, so we had a line, we had another line, and we were gonna join them, but with like first the lists and then the meshes. And that would be a list join, and we're gonna look at the stethoscope data for every little step. So this temporal viewer is cool, but it's actually more important to see numbers. Just looking at numbers, lists. First, let's have that stethoscope again. Text, stethoscope, hertz, data. I don't get this sometimes. It's like, oh, I turned this one off and I switched to the other one. Duh. Okay, so let me turn that one off then. So 2 verts. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Let's change this to 1. So if I change it, see where that one is, right there. Now I'm going to join it with another one. And we'll look at that. Okay. Staying pretty predictable here. Yeah. So this is the one that is like that. So if I change this one, look at our list shape here. On level 1, the outermost part of our list, what do we see if we only look inside to the first bracket? From the matching one on the outside here and the one on here, we look in and we see this. I see a bracket. I see a bracket. So ask those brackets how many things are on there. And they're like, I have one thing, two things. I'm done. Put another one. And then that one is one thing with three things. And then it's done. And I'm done. So what was the length of the inside part? Let's view by element. Do 1, 2. Got any more? No, not really. That's the same thing. So it was actually telling us right here nicely. Input has 2 elements, and you're looking at this list, and you're like, wait a minute, I see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many? That's more than 2. No. From the outside in, the first level sees 2 elements. This bracket here, this second bracket, doesn't really care about anything until it sees a closing bracket. And that first closing bracket, well, a closing bracket that doesn't, was the terminology here. It's closing an unclosed pair. So this second one, the third bracket runs into, oh, this is our first closing bracket, but it's closing this pair. And then we run into an opening bracket, and it's closing that one. So we were like 1. We start at 0 and we count them 1, 2, 3. So we're plus 3, minus 1, plus 1, minus 1, minus 2. So that's our comma. We have a comma. We're counting items, and we're really just looking for commas. So the first thing went up, plus 1, minus 1, plus 1, minus 1. Or wait, that was the inside one. We're only worried about our. As an example, I guess I'm mucking around in the inner level, and that's the third level. But so the second level, as in the level inside the first level, we're trying to count the things inside the first level and just think about that. Just looking at this list and getting familiar with Sverchok's basics. I don't mean to yell. I don't mean to go on. I do mean to go on and make this drill this point in. Like, this is all Sverchok is. Like, if you get this little part, you've got the rest of it. It's no problem. You understand all the other stuff in other realms. The node editor is meant to bring those realms into some interface. And Sverchok's kind of like key feature is the lists of numbers. That's what it is. And so levels wise, input has 2 elements. Well, if we trust this thing, but we're just trying to look at it and read it. Yes, we'll figure out this 2 elements. Where's the comma that separates our 2 elements? It's this comma right here. I'm gonna just draw around it. That comma. It separates our first element. Let me squeeze in through here. And our second, our first element, our second element. And backwards. Alright, got it? So that's how this has got us so far. What happens if we change our join level list? We've joined at level 2. Input has 1 element. Uh-oh. Scratch all this. Let's do this again. Let's figure this out. Comma. We don't just count commas if they're inside of the level we're not counting at. So here's our first one and our last one. And then, so from our next one, which is, we're going to call that, we're going to be like 1, 2. We ended up at 2 because it was +1, +1. So this one is a -1, and this one is a +1. So we're still at, we're at 1, 2, -1, +1, -1, +1, -1, +1, -1, +1, -1, -1 again. So that's really, that whole thing is one thing. This unit inside. And some of these algorithms are going to look at, that's what they're going to look at. They're going to look at the unit they see on level 2 altogether. And if you can't send the data in properly for the algorithm as it expects it, then, well, it will be an error. And that's the main thing of Sverchok, is like, a lot of these algorithms, they work if you give them the right data shape. And so the technique is really just to remember, okay, probably every time you make a list join, at first you will be like, what level am I joining? And then eventually you will get the idea that, okay, these are verts, I gotta join this level. Or these are edges, I gotta join this level. So for the data to work right, you have to use mesh join in the right place and a list join in the right place. You got to use splits and zips and etc. But you see these like notes that they add here, like dot 1, 1.1, 2, data dot 1, verts dot 1. We're given 2 verts out here. Why doesn't it say 2 here? But it's a verts. It's a list of 2 verts, and you have 1 list. So you sometimes you have to think about, like, backwards from this end. You work back, and you have one thing that you're giving it, or however many things. When you give it a list, that's the point where you're multiplying everything up here and giving it the options of one of those for everything on whatever you give it upstream or downstream. So it's like the downstream gets multiplied once for each thing upstream until it fits. And if there are other nodes which are like, match is for making things fit with, like, that's just, it's a node that's specifically made for where we main should be on main list match. So if I have 2 lists and I know that one of them is shorter than the other, there's logic here to say, well, stop when you run out of one, or repeat the last thing, or cycle back to the beginning, or what is this option? Just, yeah, stop at the shortest one, cycle, repeat. I don't know what xref means. But so you have all these are the toolbox of things. I'm just kind of laying it out here. It's the kind of stuff that makes your mind go a little bit crazy for a while. And it's like, you learn it and then you don't. You have to like let it sink in. So I haven't done any FL Studioing in a long time. Other than, well, I did. I installed some plugins and they were buggy. And I don't know if they're still open or not, but I was going to check them out. I was also just going to see if Ob still worked and if the world still existed and stuff like that. It does. I'm cool. I'm happy with that.